Hello everyone, this is Joshua Spodek. This is the first of two videos on the method, following up a set of videos I did on the model. The model is my model of the human emotional system, useful for leading yourself and others, and to give you increased self-awareness by understanding your emotional system and giving you access to understanding the emotions that you feel at any given time. The method is my way of using the model to lead yourself and to lead others. So the model is more static and the method is more dynamic. So to recap where we are, first we talked about why should we care about beliefs and models? Why should we care about these things? So the big reason is to become cathedral builders, to become someone that no matter what life throws at you, you can make your life what you want it to be, and you can feel how you want to, and you can be like the third stone cutter. You can say, I'm building the greatest cathedral in the land. And it's to improve yourself like Jean-Dominique Bauby in The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. He was the guy who had, after stroke, had lost control of every voluntary muscle in his body except to blink his left eyelid. Or like Viktor Frankl, whose Man's Search for Meaning described how he was captured and put in Auschwitz by the Nazis, and yet was able to find meaning, what I might call reward, in his life. And like Mark Zupan, who after a drunk driving accident had lost control in all four of his limbs and had moved ahead not just to live a good life, not just to say, I feel good. It's not just that. It's not just feeling better, but doing and achieving more of what you value. After his accident, Mark Zupan met the president, he sang on stage with Pearl Jam, he rock climbed, things like that. Then we talked about models in general. So not just about beliefs, but models, and what models, the passive view and the active view. And then we talked about the model in particular. And my goal in presenting the model was not to tell you this is how you should look at things, but to give you one way of looking at things. And if it works, great, use it. If it doesn't work, you don't have to use it. But for you to be able to create models for yourself. So I think the more skilled you are with using the model, the more you'll be able to create models and identify ones that work for you. And we ended the series on the model with an exercise, which was to write a situation in your life in the model's terms. So that was to write down your environment, in a certain situation, the environment's beliefs, emotions, and behaviors relevant to that situation. And that's going to be the starting point for where we use the method. What's to come is how to use the model. That's what the method is. And we're going to have an exercise in this one. And I want to tell you a little bit about the experience, because the exercise that I give here, when I give it in a workshop or in class, it's tremendous, the effect that it has. I remember giving it once in Shanghai, and for months afterward, I was getting emails from people who continued to meet and continued working on this exercise long after I had come back to the United States. I did the exercise one time in New York, and I remember leaving one day after the workshop ended, maybe 5 o'clock. We stayed in the room. The people kept working for like an hour. We'd been there 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and people kept working on this exercise for another hour after the allotted time in the workshop. And then at that point, it was now like 6 after, like they stayed for an extra hour. At 6, the cleaning people came in and said, you got to leave the room. The students asked, can we stay in a common area? And I left at that point, but they were still hanging out by the elevators. There were some couches there, and they kept working the exercise. When I came in the morning, they were there before me. People have had tremendous value from doing the exercise in the method, how to use the model. I hope that you get experiences like that yourself. Let's review the model for a second. You remember that it says that we exist in an environment, we perceive it, our perceptions are influenced by our beliefs, and as we perceive our environment subject to our beliefs, that leads to emotions which motivate behavior, and this cycle happens all the time. We live in an environment, we perceive it, our beliefs filter that leads to feeling emotions that lead to behavior that influence our environment, and that keeps going around and around. And when things are in sync, you feel reward. When they're not in sync, you feel not reward, maybe punishment, and that's the model really quickly. One of the big things that comes out of this is I see our emotional system as systematic. That is to say, consistent, reliable, and predictable. And I want to distinguish this from the way I used to look at it and the way a lot of people look at it. A lot of people look at emotions as things that just kind of happen. We don't understand them. They just kind of come. Like the artists speak about a muse that strikes. A muse is like a supernatural creature that makes you feel inspiration at certain times. That's saying it's outside of you. A lot of things like happiness, the root of the word happiness is hap, H-A-P, is the same root of the word happen or happenstance. It means luck or chance. So even our language has a lot of chance, non-systematic, non-consistency, inconsistency, unreliability, unpredictability in how we look at emotions. But this model suggests differently. It says that you feel emotions because of the environment's beliefs and behaviors around you. So that says that our emotional system is systematic, consistent, reliable, and predictable. By learning the system, I can be aware of and bring about the emotions that I want in myself and in others. When I create them in myself, I motivate myself to do what I want. When I do this with others, when I influence their environments, beliefs, and behaviors, that's what leaders do. I lead them. When you look at emotions as being systematic, what I'm going to show you is the method of how to use the model to create the emotions that you want, to motivate yourself as you want. And to me, I feel like it's like I'm turning a crank and I get the results that I want. It's systematic. It's not happenstance. It's not a muse striking. I can create the emotions that I want, when I want, how I want. It may take some time, it may take some effort, and at first it takes a lot of practice, but I think about it as very systematic. Now, turning the crank means living life, choosing friends, choosing communities, home, where I live, beliefs, hobbies, etc. It's hard, it may take time, but it works. Now let's get into the method. I want to start talking about what drives the method. The big thing driving the method is that, according to the model, our emotions and our feelings of reward, what we want most in life. I mean, happiness. If you want happiness in life, that's an emotion. If you want to feel reward and meaning in life, that's emotions. But according to the model, these are involuntary, things we cannot choose. It makes a lot of sense. If you want to not feel hungry, you're going to die of hunger, of starvation. So it makes sense that our emotions would not be under our control. But is this some cruel twist of fate? Are we designed not to be happy? What drives the method is that we do have voluntary levers. We can choose our environments, we can choose our beliefs, we can choose our behaviors. And because our emotions respond to that, if we choose those things, it creates the emotions that we want and the reward that we want. So we do have sufficient voluntary control for what we need to create happiness, reward, and the motivations we want for the outcomes that we want. And to the extent that we can influence other people's environments, beliefs, and behaviors, which we do as leaders, then we can create motivations in them. And that's what's driving the method, is how do we use our environments, beliefs, and behaviors to motivate ourselves. And then this piece of reward in the middle, learning requires reward. So if you want to change your behavior consistently, it helps to understand how reward influences your motivations. Now, you've changed your life before. You've led yourself to do things before. So I'm not going to tell you anything that you've never done before. These are not complex ideas. You know about environments, beliefs, rewards, behaviors. You don't have to look these words up in the dictionary. The difference about the method is it puts them together to act in concert. So you'll deliberately create emotions that a lot of times people don't think can be deliberately and systematically created. The next piece before describing the method in detail is I want to talk about things that are not the method. So things that are not the method are things that act on only one piece of these at a time. So for example, a lot of times people want to change their lives and they do what I call, I need a new house, job, girlfriend, boyfriend, car. A lot of people are in jobs that they don't really like, and their way of improving the situation is to switch to another job. Or maybe they have a house that they don't really like, and their way of switching it is to move to a new house. There may be many times when the problem with your job is, or the problem with your life is just your job, nothing else. If that's the case, it may make sense that just switching is all it takes. And this comes from a belief that the problems are external to you, or at least the solutions to the problems are external to you. The problem with this is sometimes maybe the problem isn't just your job. Maybe you have an issue that you can't handle authority very well. If that's the case and you switch to another job, you may find yourself back in the same situation with another job, or with wanting to switch jobs again. And a lot of people switch one job to another, and after a few job switches, they realize, they conclude all jobs suck. If you look only exterior, you tend to assign everything exterior. And if you think 2 or 3 jobs in a row don't work for you, a lot of people out there who could have better lives don't, because they've just concluded jobs just have to be miserable. Or they switch boyfriends or girlfriends a few times and think relationships just never really work out that well. One of the problems with working only with solutions on the exterior is that, for one thing, they can be expensive. I know a lot of people who don't like their jobs and they stay in them for years because it's a really difficult challenge to switch jobs. Or they might live in the same house for a long time and move from house to house a couple times and then realize, I never want to do it again. And it's too expensive. I don't necessarily mean too much money, but it could be too much other resources, time, attention, things like that. So it often prompts delay, and it often teaches futility and helplessness. You do it a few times, it doesn't work. If that's not where the solution was, or where the problem was, you just learn, I'm not going to try to change things. Sometimes this strategy, this non-method method can work, but in the general case, it doesn't work. Next is trying to change only your behavior, and I call this a New Year's resolution, because the classic case is it's late December, you want to get more fit, and you say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym twice a week for the next year. This comes from a belief that by only changing your behavior, you can create a big change in your life. Sometimes it can work. You go to the gym, you find out that you like it even though you didn't know you would. You find out about diet and things like that, and you realize this is really great, I really love it. But there's no guarantee that just by changing your behavior, you're going to make all these other big changes. The big issue is that when you have a behavior, when you work here on just your behavior, you're using, and that behavior is not what your emotions are motivating, then you're fighting, part of you is fighting yourself. You're using willpower to do not what your motivations want. In the long term, your emotions they operate without your consciously trying. Your willpower fades away after you stop trying. This is why gyms are full in the beginning of January and empty somewhere around Valentine's Day. Because willpower will only get you so far. And if it happens to you that you're using willpower opposing your emotions, generally your emotions will win out. Now some people say, I got willpower of steel, I can do anything. Maybe, but even if you can, you're using that energy up, you're using that attention up from other places in your life. Much more effective. Oh, and if your emotions win out over your willpower, a lot of times people conclude, I'm just not the type to do that. And it reinforces these emotions didn't come out of nowhere. They were your beliefs led you to perceive things in a way that created those emotions. If your emotions overpower your willpower, it reinforces the belief that created that emotion in the first place, leading you to have a stronger belief. That's why a lot of people feel like, I just can't do X. Because they tried a few times. If they tried it using willpower, pitting their willpower against their emotions, a lot of times they reinforce the beliefs that created the emotions in the first place, and they end up feeling more helpless than they did in the beginning. So the challenge with New Year's resolutions, with working only on your behavior, is that they can often be ineffective. Emotions have advantages over willpower. It pits you against yourself, taking resources that you could use elsewhere in your life away from that, and it reinforces counterproductive beliefs. So it can work, but it doesn't always work. So perception and belief, this is what I call the secret or law of attraction. There's lots of ways of looking at it, but a lot of people say, I'm just going to change my belief and let that propagate through my life. And so they might think, if I think friendly thoughts or I think rich thoughts, friends will be attracted to me, money will be attracted to me, and that will work out. The law of attraction says, if you think about friends, you'll get more friends. If you think about money, you will get more money. Actually, if I had to pick one non-method method, I would pick this one. If I had to do something of only working on my environment, only working on my belief, only working on my behavior, I would choose only working on my belief, because it seems to me that if you think you're going to have more friends, or say you think you're going to have more money, and two friends invite you to go out one night, and you can't go out with both, and one of them is your rich friend and one of them is your not rich friend. Well, if you have this belief that you're going to be rich, you're probably going to choose to be with a rich friend. And if you hang out with your rich friends more, you'll find out about more opportunities, and eventually things will propagate through, that it will lead to richer motivations and richer behavior and richer environments. And I think that could kind of work through. I don't believe in some law of attraction, but I think if I work through the model, it could work that way. But again, this is not that effective in the long run. It can work, but it's slow and ineffective because it takes a long time for these things to propagate through, especially compared to often people, if you only work on your beliefs and you don't work on your behavior environments, you don't make the progress that you could. If you want to have friends around you, it also helps to learn behaviors that are more friendly. It helps to go to places where more people are, especially where more people with like interests are. So a lot of people working only on beliefs don't realize that they can work on environments and behaviors at the same time. And another one here is the power of positive thinking, which is another big thing in personal and professional development. The thing about positive, for one thing, as you remember from the earlier videos, I don't like to talk about emotions being positive or negative, so I don't like the word positive. The thing about positive is what's positive and what's negative. I prefer to think of as what's consistent with what you want and what's important to you, what your values are, with your emotional system. So the term positive to me suggests something external to you. So positive doesn't necessarily fit your emotions. There are times when I want to feel maybe not necessarily positive, but motivated in a different way. Or maybe something's happened in my life that I want to experience something I wouldn't describe as positive. To me, it's being not true necessarily to yourself. And the method is always being about true to yourself. It's based in your emotions, your wiring, the system that you have, not some external definition of positive and negative. So all these non-method methods, none of them is inherently rewarding. The thing, when I describe to you the method, as soon as you start doing the method, you'll start, well, maybe not the first time, but with a few practice tries, you'll start realizing that you can feel reward as soon as you start trying it. There's no waiting period. So the other ways, you learn less about yourself and you have less fun. I'm not saying avoid any of these ways of doing things. Sometimes you just know it's only my environment. That's the only problem here. And if that's the case, just fix it. No problem. So I'm not saying don't use those ways, but recognize that they have limitations. The method in a nutshell is to know your emotional situation, what you wrote down at the end of the last video, and know what emotions and reward that you want, and then choose the voluntary levers to create the emotions and the reward that you want. So in short, environments, beliefs, and behaviors. Choose your environments, beliefs, and behaviors to create the emotions that you want. When they're all in sync, you'll feel reward. And that feeling of reward is feeling like, this is the way I want things to be. This is what I wanted. I want more of this. That's the reward. I'm not saying emotional, I'm not saying financial reward, although that may come too. I'm saying you feel reward, it means I like this situation. I want more things like this. And I really do, when I'm walking down the street, in the back of my mind is running, how are things right now? Could I feel more reward right now? If so, what environments, beliefs, and behaviors am I feeling, and could I change to create more reward for myself? So that's in a nutshell. I'm going to be more systematic about it. A short-term example is the very first time that I actually systematically implemented this in my life. So I'd been playing around with what I now call the method for a while. And one day I was going to meet a friend of mine, and we were going to watch a World Series game. I went to go to the restaurant where we were going to have dinner before going out. So I show up, and he shows up a little bit late, and he's looking really sick. And he says, Josh, I have the flu. Sorry about this. I'm going to come out to dinner with you, but I really can't go out tonight as much as I want to watch a World Series. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention that it rained that night, so there was a rain delay. So it might not have been the case that the game was even going to be shown. So we have dinner, and as I'm heading home, I'm crossing the street toward my building. And as I'm crossing the street, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not feeling very happy right now. I'm feeling forlorn. I'm feeling like I'm missing out. I looked and I thought, with my friend, we were going to go out and have fun to watch the game. We were going to have fun to go drinking, and we were going to have fun to, it was going to be, what were the three strikes? The three strikes were watching the game, having fun going with each other, and having fun meeting people. And I wasn't going to be able to do any of those, and I felt like I'm going home. I got three strikes against me. I'm just going to go home and go to sleep, maybe watch a little TV. So I'm crossing the street thinking, that's not what I was looking for tonight. And then I thought, wait a minute. I've just been playing around with this idea for this method that says that if I change my environments, beliefs, and behaviors, then I should be able to feel how I want. This is a good chance. I don't want to go home and feel lame. I want to go out. So I said, all right, I'm going to choose my environment, choose my beliefs, and choose my behavior. I'm going to go out and have fun. So the environment I chose was to go to a bar in my neighborhood. The belief was I believe that I can have fun even if I'm just by myself. And the behavior was going to be I'm going to go talk to people and meet them and have a good time with them. Long story short, within 20 minutes, I'd gone to this bar instead of going home. And as soon as I walked in, I started talking to someone, believing to myself, I can have fun with anyone I can have fun if I meet someone and talk to them. I should mention I'd worked on my social skills by this point. Years before, I might not have been able to conjure up that belief, but this time I could. And about 20 minutes after that time, when I was at that bar, I looked around and I thought to myself, I'm having a great time. Not long ago, I felt forlorn, like I was giving up. And I realized that it could not conjure up the feelings that I had before of not feeling good. And that was my first time that I used the method, and it worked. And so I'm not saying because it worked for me this one particular time, it'll work for you or for anybody else. It's not a double-blind, controlled experiment, FDA-approved sort of thing. But for me, it was all I needed. All I needed to know was that it could work once and that I could try doing it again. So I'm not trying to prove to you that this is going to work, but my students and clients find that it works for them. And I think it can work for you too. So a long-term example, this was before I developed this, but when I look back at my transition from being a graduate student to becoming an entrepreneur, I didn't intentionally do it, but I did change my environment. I took classes at the business school where I used to take classes in physics. I started developing beliefs about where it was once Einstein and Newton were my role models. I started looking at Thomas Edison. And my behavior started becoming things like presenting to venture capitalists and things like that. Lo and behold, after a little while, I started identifying as an entrepreneur as opposed to a graduate student, and I felt the emotions of excitement of starting a company. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But it was a rewarding experience. Now, I say I didn't do it systematically. It worked not doing it systematically, but had I done it systematically using the method, I think I would have saved years off of that transition. Here's the method step by step. Step 0, I call it 0 because once you do this once, you're set for the rest of your life and you don't have to do it again. So that the steps that you do each time start with 1. So the step 0 is know your emotional system. If the model works for you, there you go. That's all you need. That's to know that you have systematic an emotional system that's systematic, responding to your environment's beliefs and behaviors. If you want to have a different model, that's fine. Just know that you have an emotional system that works a certain way. If you think emotions are just random, it's not going to work for you. Okay, step 1. This is the first one that you do for each time that you want to change something, transform some part of your life. And that is understand the relevant emotional cycles and constraints. So this is the exercise that you did in the last video of the method, when you wrote down environments, beliefs, emotions, behaviors, and you identified the ones that you felt relevant to a certain situation. Oh, understand your current emotions and their environments, beliefs, and behaviors. Also know what you can and can't change and what you will and won't change. If you are Viktor Frankl and you're imprisoned in Auschwitz, you can't change that. I mean, I guess you could try to escape, but he's basically stuck there. You can't change those things. So know what you can and can't change. Know what you will and won't change. Some things I'm not willing to try. Like, I like living in New York City. If someone says your life would be better if you lived somewhere else, I'm not going to do that. I mean, I'm open to hearing it, but that's something that I put in the column of I won't change. And so step 0 and 1 I call awareness. They're easy to do and simple to do, but so quick that a lot of people skip over them, and I do not recommend that. Action without awareness can be unproductive or counterproductive. You can easily spin your wheels, go in circles for a long time. If you don't know where you are, it's hard to get from there to someplace else. If you don't know that your emotional system that is systematic, it's consistent, reliable, and predictable, if you believe that emotions are just going to pop in every now and then, you're liable to not consistently see yourself through when you get distracted by other things. If you don't understand your emotions, the ones that you feel, then you're not really sure what to change. If you know your emotional system and you understand your relevant emotional cycles and constraints, the next step is to think of what emotions you could feel in this situation. Now, why do I start with emotions? Because the emotions are what you can't change, and therefore that's the target that you're going to have to reach. If you start with your behavior, or you start with your environment, or you start with your beliefs, you might start down a path that doesn't lead to a motivation or an emotion that you can create. So our goal is to create an emotion. Our goal is to create a motivation. I hope I forget if I repeated, I use the terms emotions and motivations very similarly. There are different things slightly about them, but in the context of leading yourself and others, your emotions are your motivations. You're going to think to yourself, what emotions could I feel in a situation like this? Oftentimes, how do you come up with these things? It could be your imagination. That's the main one. Another big one is role models. So if you're trying to do something in your life that you haven't done before, you're trying to create a transformation, you might look at people who are successful at what you want to be successful at and think of, what do they feel? So if you want to be more successful in school, if you want to get higher grades, you might look at people who do have higher grades. If for you the relevant emotions relevant to work at school are, it's a distraction from doing fun things and going out and having fun with my friends, then the emotions you associate are probably going to be lack of fun. School might be lack of fun for you. If you look at people who get high grades, you might think they're probably not looking at studying as lack of fun. They probably look at it maybe the excitement of learning, or maybe it's the discovery, curiosity. So you look at the emotions that others have, or you imagine what you could have. And that's the emotion, that's going to be the target that you're going to choose your environments, beliefs, and behaviors to create. Okay, so that's step 3, which is to conceive of new environments, beliefs, and behaviors to create the emotions that the emotions will result from them. So that's why I had those exercises before about conceiving of different emotions in different situations. So what environments, beliefs, and behaviors would create the emotion that you want? So I wanted to have fun that time when I was coming home from my friend when he had the flu to watch the World Series. So I thought to myself, in what situation can I have fun? Well, I've had fun it's evening, I couldn't change that. So in evening, when can I have fun? Well, going out to bars in my neighborhood, there's some good ones, and talking to people. I didn't want to go to the bar and not talk to people. So I thought of environments. The environment was bars. The behavior was talking to people. The beliefs were if I talk to people enough, if I talk to enough people, then I'll find a few that I can have fun with. And that's what happened. So you have to conceive of cycles that are emotional cycles that are consistent with your wiring. If you're trying to think of a set of environments, beliefs, and behaviors that you can't do, it's not going to work. It has to be consistent. So I'm not going to think I'm going to go catch a Learjet to Vegas and party out there, because that's not something that I don't see how I can do that. Then you have to think of your constraints. So the things that in step 1 that you said, what you can and can't do, what you will and won't do. So don't pick something that's not within what you can do or what you're willing to do. And then at last, they have to be consistent with each other. The environments, beliefs, and behaviors have to be consistent in order for your emotional system to involuntarily create the emotions that you're looking for. When that does happen, you will feel reward and you'll feel like this is what I was looking for. Now the last step is to implement it. And when you do this, the method, step 4 is where you spend almost all of your time. Step 0 you've already done. Step 1, it takes a few minutes. I mean, the first time you did it, you wrote it out, and it might have taken you a while. But after you've written it out a couple times, in the future, it doesn't take long to write it all. Conceiving of new emotions, that can take a little while, but generally the more you've done this, the more you feel like you have a good handle on your emotions, and that comes quickly. Conceiving of environments, beliefs, and behaviors this also tends to come quickly, but then you have to do it. Doing it may take years. In the case of my home run after 3 strikes, it only took a few minutes for me to figure out what to do, and then it took me about 20 minutes before it kicked in and I was feeling happy and emotional reward. Most of the time, step 4 is where you spend the most time. And when you're leading others through the process, step 4 that's management. That usually takes more time. You create and implement those cycles in your life through your environments, beliefs, and behaviors. A couple big tips here. Oftentimes when you do this, things will work out as you expect it. You'll feel that, you'll choose your environments, beliefs, and behaviors, you'll act on them, and you'll feel the emotion. You'll be like, I wanted to be happy. And you'll feel happy, and you'll be like, that's what I was looking for. You'll feel reward. When that happens, I recommend that you over-experience, that you indulge in that feeling of reward, because that feeling of reward is what motivates you to do it again, not only to create that situation again in your life, but to create transformations in your life. On the flip side, sometimes you'll try to do some environments, beliefs, and behaviors. It won't quite work out. You'll do it a little bit off. You'll miss something from before, and you won't feel reward. That's inevitable. It will always happen. When that happens, I recommend doing the opposite of not over-experiencing it and not indulging in that misery or in that punishment, but just recognize that happens. So when it works out, indulge. When it doesn't work out, recognize that happens. Another thing that helps a lot here is to create accountability. If you let other people know that you're going through this transformation and what you're doing, in my experience, what I'm accountable for, I get done a lot more than what I'm not accountable for. So I recommend that as a big tip. Then after you've done it and you felt that transformation go through, time for another transformation. And you can transform things long-term, short-term, intense, subtle, all sorts of different transformations. So you might have more than one going on at any given time. But in general, for the big transformations in your life and the big projects you lead people through, I recommend working on one at a time. When you finish that one, you go on to the next one. This is the big exercise. I'm going to give you an overview now. I'm going to come back to it at the end of this video. So I recommend, if you can, work in groups of 2 to 4. So if you can explain the model and the method to someone and have them work with you on this, I find it works better. But when I assign it in class, a lot of people do it solo, and it works fine there too. The next step is each person share the situation to improve. You can use the one that you did at the end of the last video, but it's basically sitting down with people and saying, here's the environments, beliefs, emotions, and behavior of a situation that I want to change. Describe them to the other person, or if it's just by yourself, just ponder it. Next is have the other people suggest new emotions that could work for you. If you're thinking, I want to be better at public speaking, and you give them the environments, beliefs, emotions, behaviors that you have, they might say, public speakers could feel excitement. If excitement is one that you could work with, say, okay, let's try it. Let's see how I could get that. If it's not, you can say, maybe not excitement. And they might say, how about satisfaction? You might say, okay, let's go for that. Then the next step is together, collaboratively with the other people or by yourself, think of environments, beliefs, and behaviors that would produce the outcome that you're looking for, that would create the emotions in that situation. So the step after that, so here's what you work on. You're going to do Step 0 you've already done. Step 1, you're going to understand your relevant emotional cycles and constraints. That's writing down environments, beliefs, emotions, behaviors, the things that you feel. And you're going to explain them to the others and have them conceive of new emotions. You'll go back and forth saying, until you come up with emotions that you think could work for you in that type of situation. Then you will conceive of new environments, beliefs, and behaviors together with them. And the last step, which we get to, clarify and refine. You might have to go back and forth a few times to find environments, beliefs, and behaviors that work for you. But when you do, create accountability if you're working with others so that you can come back to them and say, this is working or not, can you help me improve? And the last step is live the environments, beliefs, and behaviors. Then you will feel the emotions and the reward. And that's a transformation. So here's an example. If you wanted to become more entrepreneurial, you might remember in the last video of the model, I gave a slide that showed what my environments, beliefs, emotions, and behaviors were for my being a graduate student. I would hope that if I sat with a group and worked this one out, or if I just did it on my own, I would come up with the following emotions that, to be more entrepreneurial, I would have more excitement, more satisfaction, and more fun than I would as a graduate student. Being a graduate student is not particularly exciting, satisfying, or fun. It wasn't for me. Well, it was kind of, but not like being entrepreneurial. Then how would I create excitement, satisfaction, and fun in an entrepreneurial context? Well, environments might be going to business school, talking to venture capitalists and meeting with them and presenting to them, and with the other co-founder of my company, working in the garage. So if people had suggested, Josh, you should take some classes at the business school, talk to venture capitalists, even if you're not ready, just try to set up the meetings and get in the garage and start building your model. That would be great advice, because it took me a long time to get there. If I'd done this exercise before that, it would have saved me a lot of time. The beliefs might be, it took me a long time to get to this one, that making money means helping people. If you create a product, the only way you can make money on it is if someone values that product more than the amount that you want, more than the amount of money that you are charging for it. If they're a rational adult, them buying it means that you've made their life better. They're getting more value than they were from the money that they gave you. From that perspective, making money is making the world a better place. Competition helps. It helps, competition in business is very different than in graduate school. So competition means you're getting more efficient, lowering prices, things like that. So those are beliefs that would help me become entrepreneurial. Behaviors would be to write a business plan, present to venture capitalists, hire people, and these are things that took me a long time to do. How about improving public speaking? So new emotions might be excitement and fun, and at least at the beginning, nothing to lose. That would have gotten me in front of audiences faster. So environments might be, go on stage, just get in front of a crowd and see what happens. New beliefs might be that speakers have high status, that messing up is fun. To believe that messing up is fun would give me a lot of freedom to try things I wouldn't otherwise. New behaviors would be to speak to an audience, to practice in the mirror, to practice on camera, to prepare. I didn't really prepare for public speaking before. So if I had sat down with a group and they'd come up with these environments, beliefs, and behaviors to create these emotions, it would have improved my public speaking a lot faster. Running a marathon, the emotions might be excitement, dedication, and discipline. And the environments might be Central Park, other runners, good shoes. New beliefs might be that it's a matter of training, not that you have to be born with it. And new behaviors might be distance running, eating well, reading about running. So these are things that would have gotten me faster to run a marathon and to have more excitement, dedication, and discipline doing it. So this is the outcome that you're going to get. And this is what the people in Shanghai kept doing for a long time after I came home and kept emailing me about it. And this is what the people stayed late and came early at the conference, and what my students keep in touch with me about is putting this stuff into practice. Ultimately, they start realizing that the more that they can do this with themselves, it gives them a great structure to lead others. Because as a leader, you often have control of other people's environments. Leaders often influence people's beliefs and their behaviors. That will create emotions, and that will create motivated employees. But the way to lead others best, in my experience, is to first lead yourself this way. Get the skills with yourself, and then apply it with others. Now, I want to talk to you about what happens when you implement the method, because it's not like you snap your fingers and it's done. So one thing is that it goes through stages. This is my experience. I'm not saying it must go through exactly these stages just this way, but generally this is what I observe. Transformations can have any characteristics. They can be short or long, simple, complex, but they do take time to take root. It may be a few seconds sometimes, it may be a few hours, it may take years. The stages that I tend to see are, first, there's a transition stage. When you first start implementing the new environments, beliefs, and behaviors, they may conflict with the old ones. So there's a bit of inertia. There's a feeling that you want to stick with the ways that you had before produced some reward. And when they produce some reward, they make you want to stay that way. If you want to take on something new, you don't yet know what will be rewarding. And so it's very easy to go back to what you knew worked before. If you want to try public speaking, you don't know that it will be rewarding for you to public speak, but you do know that at least if you stay in the audience, you won't get embarrassed. There's also some conflict. You don't know what of the old beliefs you're dropping, what of the new beliefs you're taking on, what of the old behaviors you're dropping and the new ones you're taking on. You kind of have an idea of where it will be, but you're not sure. A lot of times this makes you feel fake. I put fake in quotes. It makes you feel like, you're not the old you and you're not yet the new you. You're pretty sure that the new you will be consistent, but you're not yet there, so you feel kind of fake. And now it can happen that you never get through this stage. Sometimes you try to transform yourself in a way that isn't going to work. So if you never get reward, you may never exit the stage. You do have to reassess. I don't recommend pushing through absolutely everything possible, or everything you can. But generally you have a sense that you'll be able to make it through this. Kind of fake it till you make it. There's a reason that phrase is around. So you keep at it, and then you get to this next stage, which is support. I find that after you keep doing this enough, you start feeling like the new environments, beliefs, and behaviors, they begin to reinforce each other. You start feeling successful. For me, for example, after I was going to business school, I was still getting my PhD in physics, but I was taking some classes at the business school. And I started to meet students in different classes that I had together, and we started knowing each other. Or I would be in a presentation with a venture capitalist, and they would say something, and I was like, oh, I remember that. That's what I learned in school. So the elements begin to resonate. There's less conflict. By this stage, you start feeling like, oh, this is starting to come together. If you stick with it long enough, Then you get to what I call regular life. At this stage, the new environments and beliefs and behaviors are internalized. They've displaced the old ones. Now, that's not to say, once I started feeling like an entrepreneur, I could never again feel like a scientist. When I'm with my scientist friends, I can go back to that. It's not replacing the old me. It gives me a new option. At this stage, all the elements resonate with each other. I feel like an entrepreneur now. It's been long enough that I've been in so many situations where I've behaved and felt like and had the rewards of an entrepreneur that it just feels natural to me. And I want to point out, if you want to go through a transformation, there's a sense that you have of a deep part of yourself that you're reaching when you go through this transformation. And that fakeness that you felt in the transition period is replaced by a genuineness and an authenticity that is greater than you had before you started the transformation at all. So when I speak in public, I feel more natural than I did before I didn't speak in public at all, even though I felt more fake in the meantime, in the intervening time. That's what happens when you base the emotions that you're targeting based on your emotional system, not some abstract concept of positive thinking, not what will make you more money or what other people say you should do, but what you yourself believe will create the emotions and reward that you want. So this is about becoming more genuine and more authentic, even though you feel this fakeness in the middle. Now I've come to look at that fakeness as something that I look forward to. It tells me that I'm doing a transformation that's meaningful. So I want to describe this a long-term perspective. If you do this a lot, the first time you do it, you go through the cycle of understanding your emotions, your new environments, beliefs, and behaviors, and then you implement them. And at the end of that, you have changed your life in some way. But something more than just the one transformation has happened. Because the next transformation will be easier. Also, you tend to work on more challenging transformations. And you tend to be a better person after a transformation. I should say, one transformation brings you back to your start for a new transformation, but changes you in another dimension. So here, I'm not an animator, but I'm really proud of what I did here in my presentation. From one perspective, you're going around in a cycle, like this. But in another perspective, you're changing in a linear way. And so if you look at this from the side, when you go through a cycle, I hope you guys can see that what I've shown here is you've gone around a cycle in this way, but you've also gone up. And this change here is what I call a lifestyle change. A lifestyle change improves your life, and it's based on awareness of yourself, and it brings experience. You've gone through something you have not gone through before. It brings reward because you are creating reward, more reward in your life. That's the point of the method. It increases your skills, your ability to transform again, so you're able to go through more and more changes. People who are great leaders tend to be the ones who are learning the most all the time, changing themselves the most all the time. They're the most flexible. That's been my experience. And it creates an expectation of success. And to me, the words expectation of success is virtually synonymous with the word motivation. So that the more that you transform yourself, the more that you become more genuine, more true to yourself, the more that you can do it again. And so if you keep doing transformation after transformation, you grow and grow and grow and grow. And so I went online trying to find a helix, a spiral, and the best one I could find was this picture of a telephone cord. So imagine each time around, one cycle of this is one transformation of your life, and each time that you do it, you move up a little bit. And this is the change that I see, is that you start where you are now is down here. And each time you go through transformation, you increase your leadership skills and you create for yourself a more rewarding life. And the more that you act on that, it becomes easier and easier to transform again because you've developed skills of transforming yourself. So it's an easier improvement. Then you move on to taking on bigger and bigger changes. As you succeed more and more, you make bigger and bigger changes. That increases your emotional intelligence. That leads to more and more self-awareness. That leads to more and more social skills, which leads to more and more leadership. And it may happen in different orders or slightly different ways. This is how it's worked for me. And ultimately, it leads to freedom, genuineness, authenticity, and beyond. The more that you do this, the more true to yourself you become, the more naturally you do things. And it may happen in different orders for you, but this is the type of change that happens long-term in your life the more that you go through these transformations. All of this is just based on a single transformation, doing it once or twice, feeling that reward, and then repeating it. So you transform once or twice, that creates reward and improvement, you realize you can expect more, you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and you're set for life. That's the crank that I talked about before. You just keep turning the crank and you create the motivations that you want, it creates the lifestyle that you want, and it creates the community that you want, and you just keep doing this again and again and again. And that's why I walk down the street thinking to myself, what level of reward do I feel right now? Can I increase it? And if so, what environments, beliefs, and behaviors can I act on? It takes time and resources, especially step 4, implementation, but it works. You just keep at it and it works. So long term, when all the cycles produce reward across a range of characteristics, you're living the life that you want. For me, if I were to line up all of the cycles in my life, over on the right, these are the things that are the most rewarding things in my life, and over on the left are the things that are the least rewarding, the most punishing. So the more cycles I do, the rewarding things get more rewarding, and the punishing things get less punishing, and you start looking like this, and you keep going, and you start looking like this, and eventually, I don't know if I can get rid of everything that's not rewarding in my life, but the rewarding things are more and more rewarding, and the middle things are all also more and more rewarding. And I want to point out, this is not becoming fat, dumb, and happy. This is not just saying you're feeling happy. This is becoming more and more consistent with your values, the things inside you that are already there, that don't have anything to do with me or the method or anything like that. They're there. This helps reveal them. Others recognize this. They see when you are living your dreams. People follow people who know what brings them reward and create it. People will be attracted to you. Now, I want to lower barriers. I want to point out that this is easier than you might think. You've already done this. So we've all transformed. You were once a child, and now you're an adult. You were in high school, then you were in college. Maybe you're beyond. I'm not sure where you are. You were once single, then you had a boyfriend or girlfriend, then you were single again. And you might say, wait a minute. Changing from child to adult, that's not a transformation. I didn't intentionally do that. Well, you did change your beliefs. I mean, you might say it's because of external things, but you did go through these changes. You went through changes like this. Because it was forced on you by time, doesn't change that you did transform, that you did change your beliefs, you change your environments, you change your behavior. You can do it without being forced to. That's my point. You've been through changes. The only difference now is that we're putting the pieces together and acting deliberately and systematically. Another big piece of this is that there's no need to sacrifice now in hopes of a future benefit. The process is rewarding from the start. As soon as you choose your environments, beliefs, and behaviors and act on them, the time it takes for your emotions to kick in is all the time it takes to start feeling reward. So for me, when I changed from a graduate student to an entrepreneur, it took a long time for that reward to kick in, but if I had done it systematically, I would know that as soon as I started doing it, I would feel the reward of putting everything into gear. Instead, I had to wait. By choosing to do it this way, systematically, the reward comes in much faster. So here's a little exercise, a little thought exercise for you, for flexibility on models of yourself. Because for a lot of people, that's the biggest thing here, is that feeling of fakeness, that feeling like it's not really me, the feeling that you're not really, that you're trying to be someone else. Here's a question for you. Who are you? I want you to answer it in this way. Describe yourself with 3 or 4 adjectives. Just pause the video for a second to give yourself a chance to write them down or think about them, and think of 3 or 4 adjectives to describe yourself. Now imagine yourself in a job interview and answer the same question. Who are you? Now I bet that you write down a different set of adjectives. Maybe 1 or 2 might be the same. Sometimes people will write all the same adjectives. But I bet if a potential employer was interviewing you and said, describe yourself in 4 adjectives, I bet that they would be different adjectives than you would when I, on this video, asked you to do it. If that's the case, you have different models for yourself at different times based on your environment. Well, now say you're talking to your parents and they ask you to describe yourself in 4 adjectives. Would you use the exact same 4 adjectives as before? Or would they be different? If so, if they're different, then you have different adjectives and you have different models for yourself. Imagine meeting someone you're attracted to and that person asked you the same question to describe yourself. Would that be the same as how you describe yourself to your parents, as you describe yourself to a potential employer? Every now and then I get someone who says all of them would all be the same. But is it possible, is there any other time that you could describe yourself in some different number of adjectives? If so, you have different models for yourself at different times based on your environment. So the first lesson I would say here, the passive one, is that you already have different beliefs about yourself at different times. A more active view is that your identity is not so fixed. You already change it for different people based on external things. Why not change it for yourself? Why not change your own perception of yourself for yourself on purpose? And in terms of leading others, can you influence others to have different ideas about themselves? If you can change about yourself, you don't have as many lever arms with others, but I think you can do it. Here's a low-level tip. When you're choosing new beliefs for yourself, rarely are the effective ones the opposite of the existing ones. So if you think to yourself, if you're in graduate school and you think Newton is a great role model, I don't recommend Newton is a terrible role model to be your new belief. It's not really that effective. For example, if I have a belief, If I'm angry and I want to be not angry, I don't try to be not angry. I find something else that I could be. So calm might be one, or calm might not be so easy, but curious might be an easier one to achieve. An effective tactic is to use the phrase, don't look for blame, but take responsibility for improving things to the extent that you can. You remember that was a belief that I used to illustrate beliefs, but it's one that I believe, and I find it very useful. The more that I can put the beliefs on myself, the more I can do something about them. So you remember the example I gave last time was, this party is lame. If you believe the party is lame, if it's something about the party, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, there might be some limited things, but there's a lot less than you can do about it. If you believe I can have fun anywhere, anytime, that gives you the ability to figure out how to have fun. That's taking responsibility instead of blaming. Blaming puts it outward, taking responsibility brings it inward. How to apply, don't look for blame, but take responsibility for making things better to the extent that you can. Using responsibility over blame, what are some candidate alternative beliefs and behaviors to the following situations? So think for yourself. Someone isn't calling you. They said they were going to call you Monday, and Friday comes. What could you believe? One thing is they hate me. One thing is they don't care about me. One is they think I'm a loser. That's all on them. What beliefs could you pick up instead? Maybe if I call them, maybe I can fix the situation. Maybe I can do something different where I don't depend on them. I can make the most of the situation. What's another situation? My boss is a jerk. I have a lot of clients who come in and they have issues with their boss. If I just say my boss is a jerk, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. What can I do it? I have the ability to up-lead. I can handle more difficult situations than my boss can create. What else can you do there? Or my job sucks. Well, if you think you just have a job that sucks, there's not a lot you can do about it. What alternative beliefs could you have alternative to my job sucks, especially ones that take on responsibility for yourself? I'm not saying that blames yourself. I'm saying you can take responsibility for doing something. I just can't lose weight. Well, if you haven't so far, that might be a belief you're justified in. But it's saying it about yourself, but it's saying it's an impossibility. It's a blame. It's an internal blame. What could you believe instead? Other people who felt like me have been able to do it. If they can do it, I can too. There's so much work to do. I can't do it all. Sometimes people feel helpless that way. If they don't want to feel helpless, what other belief could you have that would make you feel more powerful? So any problem in your life that you're blaming someone else or something for, I'm sure there are things that you're blaming outside things for that you could take responsibility for. So I want to repeat, the main exercise is to form a small group if you can. If you can only do it solo, you can do it solo. It works that way too. But it works. I found it works pretty well with small groups as well. And that's 2 to 4 people. Each person in the group, if that's only yourself, that's only yourself. Each person share the situation you want to improve. So that's writing down environments, beliefs, emotions, behaviors, and filling out them for the situation that you want to change. Describe them to the other people, or spend a little time and understand them yourself. Others will suggest the new emotions. Remember, begin with emotions. What emotions can you have in the situation? If others suggest it, use their suggestions. If you're working by yourself, use your imagination or think of role models that you could emulate. Once you have those emotions, what environments, beliefs, and behaviors could create those emotions in that context? Clarify and refine. Keep working at it until you have something that could work. Create accountability. If there are other people there, ask them to keep track of you. Touch base once a week, once a month, once a day, whatever seems right, whatever seems like it'll work for your project. And what you're going to write is new emotions, new environments, new beliefs, and new behaviors. First the emotions, before you do the environments, beliefs, and behaviors. Then the environments, and beliefs, and behaviors. And the last step, the last part of the exercise, is to live the environments, beliefs, and behaviors. That's where you're going to spend your time. But I predict that if you do it, that you'll start to feel reward and you'll want to do it again. So that's the method. There's going to be one more video to give you tips and milestones to follow to make it easier in the future and to keep doing it long term. Thank you again.